Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Victor Crowe adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, admiring the photograph beside it. 18 years of marriage captured in a silver frame. Barbara Morse Crowe smiled back at him from their wedding day. Her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes bright with what he believed was genuine love. Their daughter Lindsay, now 16, had inherited her mother's striking features and his own steel-gray eyes. At 45, Victor had successfully transitioned from his mysterious government work to civilian life as a security consultant. His neighbors in the affluent Riverside Hills subdivision knew him as a quiet, dependable man who traveled frequently for business. They had no idea that for 18 years before meeting Barbara, he'd been one of the most lethal operatives in the CIA's Special Activities Division. "Dad, I'm heading to soccer practice," Lindsay called from the kitchen, her voice carrying the casual confidence of a teenager who'd never known real danger. "Drive safe, sweetheart," Victor replied, pocketing his keys. His consulting firm, Crowe Security Solutions, had grown into a multi-million-dollar operation, providing protection services for corporate executives and foreign dignitaries. The irony wasn't lost on him. He now protected the type of people he'd once been ordered to eliminate. Barbara emerged from their bedroom, dressed in yoga attire that accentuated her still impressive figure. At 42, she maintained the appearance of a woman 10 years younger through dedicated fitness and expensive treatments. "Another business trip?" she asked, noting his overnight bag. "Chicago. Back Thursday." Victor kissed her cheek, catching a hint of unfamiliar cologne. He filed the detail away without expression. Old habits died hard. "I'll miss you," Barbara said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. As Victor's black BMW pulled out of their circular driveway, he didn't notice the silver sedan that had been parked 3 houses down for the past week, or the telephoto lens that had been documenting his every move. Inside the house, Barbara waited exactly 10 minutes before retrieving a burner phone from her jewelry box. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. "He's gone," she whispered into the device. "You have until Thursday." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "The payment? Already transferred. Half now, half when it's done." "Mrs. Crowe, you understand there's no going back after this." Barbara stared at her wedding photo. Victor's genuine smile, a stark contrast to the calculating expression she wore now. "There's been no going back for months, Mr. Abbott. Just make it quick." Marvin Abbott ended the call and studied the surveillance photos spread across his motel room desk. $250,000 for a single target, the highest fee he'd ever commanded. His client had been very specific. It had to look like a robbery gone wrong. No connection to her. No questions. At 58, Marvin had earned his reputation through 3 decades of perfectly executed contracts. 53 successful eliminations, each one meticulously planned and flawlessly executed. Politicians, crime bosses, corporate whistleblowers. He'd killed them all with the detached efficiency of a surgeon. What Barbara Morse Crowe didn't know was that her husband's name had appeared in Marvin's classified military files years ago. Victor Crowe, CIA operative, kill count classified, but rumored to be in the hundreds. The man was a legend in certain circles, though he'd supposedly retired to civilian life. Marvin studied the photos again. Victor looked soft now, domesticated. 18 years of suburban life would dull anyone's edge. Still, the assassin felt an unusual flutter of anticipation. This wouldn't be like killing some overweight senator or corrupt businessman. This was a professional engaging another professional, even if the target didn't know it yet. The contract would be fulfilled within 48 hours. Marvin Abbott never failed. Chapter 2. Shadows and Secrets. Dennis Buckley loosened his tie as he entered the upscale downtown hotel, scanning the lobby with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to clandestine meetings. At 38, he possessed the aggressive confidence that had made him one of the city's most successful real estate developers. His company, Buckley Properties, specialized in luxury developments that transformed entire neighborhoods. Barbara was already waiting in the hotel bar, nursing a martini with shaking hands. The past 6 months of their affair had evolved from passionate escapism to something darker, more desperate. "Is it done?" Dennis asked, sliding into the booth beside her. "I made the call." Barbara's voice was barely audible. "Marvin Abbott. He's supposed to be the best." Dennis's hand found hers under the table. "Once Victor's gone, we can be together. No more sneaking around, no more lies." "What about Lindsay?" "She's going to lose her father. She'll adjust. Kids are resilient." Dennis's callousness chilled Barbara, but she was too deep into their plan to back out now. Besides, the life insurance will ensure she's well taken care of. $2 million is nothing to sneeze at. Barbara had met Dennis 18 months ago when Victor hired Buckley Properties to develop a piece of land he'd inherited. The chemistry between them had been immediate and overwhelming. Dennis was everything Victor wasn't: spontaneous, passionate, dangerous. Where Victor was steady and reliable, Dennis was unpredictable and exciting. The affair had begun innocently enough. Coffee meetings that became lunch, then dinner, then hotel rooms. But Dennis had bigger ambitions than just sleeping with a married woman. He'd researched Victor's background, discovering hints of his government past and the substantial wealth he'd accumulated. More importantly, he learned about Victor's life insurance policy and Barbara's position as the sole beneficiary. "You're sure this assassin is reliable?" Dennis asked. "He came highly recommended from certain circles." Barbara had paid a substantial sum to a private investigator who operated in the gray areas of the law. The PI had connections to people who made problems disappear permanently. "And there's no way this traces back to us. The money came from an offshore account. I used a shell company that doesn't exist on paper. Even if they investigate, they'll find nothing." What neither of them knew was that Victor had installed sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout their home years ago, a precaution born from his intelligence background. Hidden cameras and audio devices had captured everything: Barbara's phone calls, Dennis's visits when Victor traveled, even their detailed discussions about eliminating him. The surveillance system uploaded directly to a secure server that Victor monitored remotely. He discovered the affair 3 weeks ago, but had continued gathering evidence, building a complete picture of their betrayal. Old instincts had kicked in: never act on incomplete intelligence. Always know your enemy's full capabilities before striking. Victor sat in his Chicago hotel room, watching live footage of his wife and her lover planning his murder. The pain of betrayal had given way to something colder, more calculating. Barbara had chosen to play a game where the stakes were life and death. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who'd mastered that particular game long before she was born. His secure laptop displayed detailed files on both Dennis Buckley and Marvin Abbott. The assassin's background was particularly interesting. Former military, dishonorable discharge, suspected in multiple high-profile killings but never convicted. A dangerous man, but one operating under the assumption that his target was a soft suburban businessman. Victor's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Santos Preston, his former CIA handler who now ran a private intelligence firm. Confirmed. Abbott is in town. Reconnaissance phase. Estimate 24 to 48 hours before he moves. Victor smiled for the first time in weeks. Barbara had hired a professional killer, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. He was a professional killer too. The difference was that he was better at it than Marvin Abbott could ever hope to be. The game was about to begin, and Victor Crowe intended to ensure he was the only one left standing when it ended. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Marvin Abbott crouched in the tree line behind the Crowe residence, studying the house through military-grade binoculars. 18 years of intelligence training had taught him patience, but 3 weeks of surveillance had revealed patterns that would make this contract easier than most. Victor's absence had confirmed the timeline. The target would return Thursday evening, probably around 7 p.m., based on previous trips. The house's security system was sophisticated but not impenetrable. Barbara had provided the codes. Lindsay would be at her friend Carrie Dixon's house for a sleepover, leaving Victor alone and vulnerable. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marvin would enter through the back door, stage a robbery in the living room, then wait for Victor to investigate the noise. A single suppressed shot to the head ransacked the house further and escaped through the same route. By the time police arrived, it would appear as a burglary gone wrong. What Marvin didn't realize was that Victor had been tracking his movements since the moment he'd arrived in town. Micro-surveillance devices placed throughout the neighborhood had captured the assassin's reconnaissance activities. More importantly, Victor had identified Marvin's base of operations, a seedy motel on the outskirts of town where he'd registered under a false name. Thursday evening arrived with unseasonable storm clouds gathering over Riverside Hills. Victor's BMW pulled into his driveway at exactly 7:15 p.m., 15 minutes later than his usual schedule. The delay was intentional. He wanted Marvin already inside the house when he arrived. Barbara greeted him at the door with unusual enthusiasm, her kiss lasting longer than it had in months. Guilt made her demonstrative, not knowing that Victor could see the relief in her eyes. "How was Chicago?" she asked, taking his overnight bag. "Productive. New client in the financial sector. Lots of late nights ahead." Victor's tone was casual, but he was mentally cataloging every detail of the house's interior. His trained eye spotted the subtle signs: disturbed dust patterns on the back porch, a window screen that had been carefully reattached, footprints in the flower bed that weren't there when he'd left. Marvin Abbott was already inside. "I'm going to grab a shower," Victor announced. "Long flight." Barbara nodded, retreating to the kitchen where she presumably busied herself with dinner preparations. In reality, she was texting Dennis. "He's home. Should be over soon." Victor climbed the stairs, his movements deliberately loud enough to mask the sound of him retrieving a concealed Sig Sauer P226 from a hidden compartment in his bedroom closet. The weapon felt comfortable in his hands, an old friend returning after a long absence. He could sense Marvin's presence now, the subtle wrongness that came from sharing space with someone who intended you harm. The assassin was good. Victor would give him that. Most people would never have detected the intrusion. But Victor Crowe wasn't most people. Moving with the silent precision of a predator, Victor descended the back staircase that led to the kitchen. Through the doorway, he could see Barbara pretending to cook, her movements nervous and artificial. Poor Barbara. She had no idea she was about to witness something that would haunt her forever. The attack came as Victor entered the living room. Marvin Abbott emerged from behind the large sectional sofa, suppressed pistol raised with professional competence. For a moment, the two men faced each other across the expensively furnished room, predator recognizing predator. "Your wife paid me to blow up your skull," Marvin said, his voice carrying the calm confidence of a man who'd done this 53 times before. He gestured toward a manila folder on the coffee table. "I've killed 53 targets. You'll be 54. Victor studied the portfolio of death that Marvin had laid out. Photographs of previous victims, newspaper clippings, trophies from a career built on ending lives. The display was meant to intimidate, to paralyze the target with fear. Instead, Victor smiled with genuine amusement. "Impressive portfolio," Victor replied, his voice carrying no trace of fear. "After 18 years as an undercover black ops officer, my count is 312. The number hit Marvin like a physical blow. His research had suggested Victor was former government, but the kill count placed him in an entirely different category. 312 confirmed eliminations meant Victor Crowe wasn't just former intelligence. He was legend. Marvin's hands began to shake as the implications sank in. He'd accepted a contract to kill one of the most dangerous men alive, a ghost from the intelligence community who'd supposedly retired to suburban obscurity. But retirement didn't erase training, and training like Victor's never truly faded. The red laser appeared on Marvin's forehead with mechanical precision. Victor's backup weapon, a compact Glock with laser sight, had materialized in his left hand while the assassin was processing the revelation. Years of muscle memory made the draw faster than conscious thought. "Now, Mr. Abbott," Victor said conversationally, "we're going to have a very important discussion about who hired you, why, and what you're going to do to make this right." Barbara's scream from the kitchen doorway shattered the tense silence. She stood frozen, witnessing the collapse of her carefully laid plans. The supposedly harmless husband she betrayed was not only alive, but had somehow gained the upper hand on a professional killer. Victor's eyes never left Marvin as he spoke to his wife. "Hello, darling. I trust you're surprised to see me breathing." The game. Chapter 4. Revelations and Alliances. The silence in the Crowe living room stretched like a taut wire as 3 lives hung in the balance. Victor maintained his aim on Marvin Abbott while keeping Barbara in his peripheral vision. 18 years of marriage had taught him to read her expressions, and what he saw now wasn't just shock, it was calculation. Even caught red-handed, Barbara was looking for an escape route. "Put the gun down, Marvin," Victor commanded. "Slowly. We're all going to have a conversation." The assassin complied, his professional instincts recognizing that resistance would be suicide. As the suppressed pistol hit the carpet, Victor quickly secured it while maintaining his own weapon's aim. "Barbara, why don't you join us? Seems you have some explaining to do." Barbara entered the room on unsteady legs, her face pale but defiant. "I don't know what this man is talking about, Victor. I've never seen him before in my life." Victor almost laughed at the transparent lie. "Really? Then how did he know about the life insurance policy? How did he get our security codes? How did he know exactly when I'd be traveling?" Barbara's protest died as Victor produced a tablet, queuing up audio from his hidden surveillance system. "The payment? Already transferred. Half now, half when it's done." Her own voice filled the room, crystal clear and damning. Barbara's defiance crumbled as months of recorded conversations played back. Planning sessions with Dennis, detailed discussions about Victor's schedule, even intimate moments between the lovers where they fantasized about their future together after his death. "How long have you known?" Barbara whispered. 3 weeks. Long enough to watch you plan my murder in exquisite detail." Victor's voice carried no emotion, but Marvin Abbott recognized the tone. It was the voice of someone deciding whether to kill or spare, weighing options with the cold precision of a machine. "What do you want?" Marvin asked. The assassin had survived 30 years in a deadly profession by knowing when to negotiate and when to fight. "Information. Everything. Who recommended you to my wife? How did you two make contact? What other contracts are you currently working on?" "I don't." Victor's gun shifted slightly, the laser moving from Marvin's forehead to his kneecap. "Let me be clear, Mr. Abbott. I've spent 18 years perfecting the art of extracting information from uncooperative subjects. I can make you talk, but it won't be pleasant. Or you can cooperate, and we'll discuss mutually beneficial arrangements." The implications weren't lost on Marvin. Victor wasn't threatening to kill him. He was offering a partnership. The assassin's mind raced as he processed this unexpected development. "Harold Snyder," Marvin said finally. "Private investigator. Works the gray areas for clients who need problems solved permanently. Your wife contacted him, he contacted me." Victor nodded, filing the name away. "Payment method? Offshore account. Cayman Islands Bank. She used a shell company, Riverside Holdings. And you believe this would never trace back to her?" Snyder vouched for her operational security, said she was connected, sophisticated. Barbara flinched at the word connected. Victor caught the reaction and filed it away for future analysis. "What's your current contract load?" 3 active. A city councilman in Denver, a federal prosecutor in Miami, and a whistleblower in Seattle. Victor processed this information with growing interest. 3 targets, all connected to corruption investigations. Someone was cleaning house, eliminating threats to powerful interests, and Marvin Abbott was their instrument. "Who's your handler for these contracts?" "Same as always. Harold Snyder coordinates everything." Victor smiled, the expression predatory rather than pleasant. "Mr. Abbott, I'm going to make you an offer. You can continue working for Harold Snyder, taking contracts that expose you to eventual capture and execution. Or you can work for me, using your skills for more entrepreneurial purposes." "What kind of purposes?" "The kind that eliminate problems permanently while generating substantial profit." Victor turned to Barbara, his expression hardening. "Starting with the problem of my unfaithful wife and her lover." Barbara's eyes widened in terror. "Victor, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can forgive and forget. Victor's laugh was devoid of warmth. Barbara, you hired a professional killer to murder me. That's not a mistake. It's an act of war. And I never lose wars. Marvin watched the exchange with professional fascination. He'd killed 53 people, but he'd never seen anyone display Victor's combination of calculated fury and tactical precision. The man was offering him a partnership born from betrayal, cemented by mutual benefit and the promise of violence against their enemies. What's in it for me? Marvin asked. 50% of everything we take. Protection from law enforcement. Access to intelligence networks that will make you untouchable. And the satisfaction of watching everyone who betrayed us pay the ultimate price. The assassin considered the offer. His current arrangement with Harold Snyder was lucrative but dangerous. Federal investigators were closing in, and it was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots. Working with Victor Crowe offered protection, profit, and the backing of someone with elite intelligence training. I'm listening, Marvin said. Victor nodded approvingly. Barbara called Dennis. Tell him to come over immediately. Tell him the plan failed, and you need to discuss cleanup strategies. I won't. The laser appeared on Barbara's chest. You will, because if you don't, I'll kill you now and handle Dennis myself. Either way, this ends tonight. Barbara reached for her phone with trembling hands. As she dialed Dennis's number, Victor began explaining his plan to Marvin Abbott. By the time Dennis Buckley arrived, they would be ready for him. The old Victor Crowe, the suburban family man, was gone forever. In his place stood the predator he'd once been, backed by a professional killer and driven by a need for absolute justice. Harold Snyder, Dennis Buckley, and everyone else who participated in betraying him would learn why Victor Crowe had been feared throughout the intelligence community. The lesson would be permanent. Chapter 5. The Network Unravels. Dennis Buckley's Mercedes AMG roared into the Crowe driveway 23 minutes after Barbara's call. He'd broken multiple traffic laws getting there, driven by a mixture of panic and rage. The plan had been perfect. How had it gone wrong? Victor watched from the upstairs window as Dennis approached the house. The man moved with aggressive confidence, even in crisis, confirming Victor's assessment of his personality type. Dennis was a narcissist who believed his charm and intelligence made him untouchable. Tonight would disabuse him of that notion permanently. Remember the plan, Victor said to Marvin Abbott, who was now positioned behind the living room door. Let me do the talking initially. Only act if he tries to run or becomes violent. Barbara sat rigidly on the sofa, her hands trembling as she prepared to face her lover. Victor had given her explicit instructions. Act panicked, blame the assassin's failure on bad intelligence, and keep Dennis talking until he revealed the full scope of their conspiracy. The front door opened with Dennis's usual presumptuous familiarity. Barbara, where are you? We need to. He stopped dead in the doorway as he saw Victor standing calmly in the living room, very much alive and holding a pistol with casual competence. Hello, Dennis. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Dennis's eyes darted to Barbara, searching for an explanation. His gaze then fell on the manila folder containing Marvin's portfolio of death, and understanding dawned with sickening clarity. I can explain, Dennis began. No need. I have recordings of everything. Your affair with my wife, the planning sessions, even your romantic discussions about spending my life insurance money. Victor's voice carried no heat, just cold, factual presentation. What I need now is information about your broader network. Network? I don't know what you're talking about. Victor produced his tablet, queuing up surveillance footage from Dennis's office. The screen showed Dennis in animated conversation with a man Victor hadn't seen before, someone who clearly wasn't part of the real estate business. Jorge Rivers, Victor said, reading from a file. Curious associate for a real estate developer. According to my research, Mr. Rivers specializes in money laundering for organized crime families. Care to explain that relationship? Dennis's face drained of color. The surveillance network Victor had deployed extended far beyond his own home. Traffic cameras, security feeds from nearby businesses, even Dennis's own office. Everything had been monitored and recorded. You've been busy, Dennis. Buckley Properties isn't just developing real estate. You're washing money for some very dangerous people. The question is, who else knows about your arrangement with Jorge Rivers? Look, Victor, we can work something out. I have connections, resources. We can all benefit here. Marvin Abbott stepped out from behind the door, his presence adding weight to Victor's threats. Dennis recognized the type immediately, professional muscle, the kind of man who solved problems with violence. Mr. Buckley, Marvin said quietly, I've spent the last hour explaining to Mr. Crowe how I've killed 53 people. Would you like me to demonstrate my techniques? Jesus Christ, Barbara, what have you done? Dennis's composure finally cracked. You said you hired some nobody street thug, not a professional killer. Actually, Victor interjected, she hired Mr. Abbott. I've since retained his services for my own purposes. Which brings us to your immediate problem. Victor moved to his laptop, pulling up financial records that made Dennis's eyes widen in shock. Bank statements, wire transfer records, detailed accounting of every transaction between Buckley Properties and Jorge Rivers' criminal organization. 18 months of money laundering. Roughly $15 million in illegal proceeds filtered through your development projects. The FBI would be very interested in this information. How did you get access to your private financial records? Dennis, I spent 18 years working for people who could access anything, anywhere, anytime. Your security is laughable. Barbara watched the exchange with growing horror. She thought she was manipulating a simple businessman, not someone with Victor's capabilities. Every secret was being exposed, every hidden arrangement dragged into the light. What do you want? Dennis asked finally. Information. Jorge Rivers reports to someone higher up the food chain. I want names, locations, operational details. Everything. I can't. If they find out I talked, they're going to find out anyway. Victor displayed another file on his screen. Because tomorrow morning, I'm delivering copies of all your financial records to FBI agent Earl Arias, who heads the Organized Crime Task Force. The only question is whether you're listed as a cooperating witness or a primary target. Dennis's knees buckled as the implications hit him. Victor wasn't just threatening exposure. He was orchestrating Dennis's complete destruction. The real estate empire, the criminal connections, the money, the future with Barbara, all of it was about to disappear. The Russians, Dennis whispered. Jorge works for the Petrov family. They use my developments to legitimize money from human trafficking, drug distribution, arms dealing. Victor Petrov runs everything from a compound in the mountains. Victor nodded approvingly. See, cooperation makes everything easier. What about Barbara? Dennis asked. What happens to her? Victor's smile was arctic. Barbara made her choice when she decided I should die. Now she gets to live with the consequences. The plan Victor was assembling in his mind was ambitious beyond anything he'd attempted during his CIA years. He would dismantle the Petrov organization, eliminate everyone who betrayed him, and emerge with enough money and power to disappear forever if necessary. But first, he needed one more piece of information. Dennis, who else knows about your relationship with Barbara? What do you mean? I mean, who else in your organization or the Petrov family knows you've been sleeping with the wife of a former CIA operative? Dennis's face went ashen as he realized the implications. I mentioned it to Jorge. He thought it was funny, a high-stakes affair. He might have told others. Victor's expression hardened. So the Petrov family knows about my existence, my background, and my connection to their money laundering operation. I never told them your real background. I just said you were some security consultant. But they have your phone records, your communications, your surveillance footage. If they're as sophisticated as I suspect, they've already identified me as a potential threat. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Victor hadn't just uncovered a simple affair. He'd stumbled into a war with organized crime figures who now saw him as a liability to be eliminated. Victor smiled grimly. If the Petrov family wanted a war, they would get one. But they had no idea what they were dealing with. By the time he was finished, everyone who'd betrayed or threatened him would be dead, and he'd be rich enough to disappear forever. The game was about to become much more interesting. Chapter 6. Building the War Machine. The safe house Victor had established 3 years earlier sat hidden in the mountains 30 miles outside the city. Officially, it was a hunting cabin owned by a shell corporation. In reality, it was a fully equipped operations center containing enough weapons, surveillance equipment, and communications gear to wage a small war. Marvin Abbott surveyed the arsenal with professional appreciation. Military-grade rifles, explosives, night vision equipment, and communication devices that could coordinate complex operations across multiple locations. Victor Crowe hadn't just retired from the CIA. He'd prepared for the possibility of returning to his old profession. Impressive setup, Marvin observed, examining a Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle. Planning for something specific? I learned early in my career that retirement from the intelligence community is often temporary, Victor replied, powering up a bank of computers. Men like us make enemies who hold grudges for decades. Over the past 48 hours, Victor had assembled a complete intelligence profile on the Petrov crime family. Viktor Petrov, 62, had emigrated from Russia 20 years earlier and built a criminal empire spanning human trafficking, narcotics, arms dealing, and money laundering. His organization employed over 200 people, from street-level dealers to corrupt government officials. The family's mountain compound was a fortress equipped with military-grade security systems and defended by ex-Spetsnaz operatives. Traditional law enforcement approaches had failed repeatedly. The Petrovs had too many judges, prosecutors, and police officials on their payroll. How many men does Petrov have at the compound? Marvin asked, studying surveillance photographs. 30 to 40 at any given time. Heavily armed, professionally trained, excellent defensive positions. Victor pulled up architectural plans of the facility. Direct assault would be suicide, even with our skills. So we hit them elsewhere. Exactly. We dismantle their operations piece by piece, targeting their revenue streams and key personnel. Create enough chaos to force Victor into the open. Victor's plan was elegantly vicious. Phase 1 would target Dennis Buckley and Jorge Rivers, eliminating the money laundering network while framing it as an internal power struggle. Phase 2 would systematically eliminate Petrov's street-level operations, creating the impression of a rival organization moving against them. Phase 3 would be direct confrontation when Viktor Petrov was isolated and vulnerable. What about the FBI investigation? Marvin asked. Agent Earl Arias received an anonymous package this morning. Complete financial records, transaction logs, even surveillance footage of Jorge Rivers discussing operations. Victor smiled grimly. By tomorrow, federal agents will be raiding Buckley properties and freezing every account connected to the money laundering operation. And Dennis is about to have a very bad day. The plan for Dennis Buckley was personal. Victor had discovered that Dennis owned a luxury yacht moored at the private marina downtown, the same yacht where he'd taken Barbara for romantic weekends while Victor traveled for business. Tonight, Dennis would receive a call from Jorge Rivers requesting an emergency meeting on the yacht to discuss the FBI investigation. Jorge Rivers wouldn't be making that call. Victor and Marvin had intercepted the money launderer 6 hours earlier as he left his downtown office. Jorge was currently secured in the safe house basement, alive but thoroughly terrified. His phone, computer, and access codes were now in Victor's possession. The beauty of this approach, Victor explained as he composed messages using Jorge's phone, is that we're using their own security protocols against them. Dennis will believe the meeting is legitimate until it's too late. At 8:47 p.m., Dennis Buckley received an encrypted text from Jorge Rivers. FBI got financial records. Need immediate cleanup discussion. Meet at yacht 10 p.m. Come alone. Trust no one else. Dennis's response was predictably panicked. How did they get the records? Who's compromised? Unknown. Bring all physical files. We burn everything tonight. Victor monitored the exchange with satisfaction. Dennis was walking into a trap, driven by desperation and the belief that Jorge Rivers could somehow salvage the situation. While Victor prepared for the yacht meeting, Marvin Abbott was conducting his own operation across town. Harold Snyder, the private investigator who'd connected Barbara with Marvin's assassination services, was about to receive an unexpected visit. Snyder operated from a converted warehouse in the industrial district, far from the respectable facade he presented to civilian clients. His real business involved coordinating criminal services for wealthy clients who needed problems solved permanently. Murder, blackmail, witness intimidation. Harold Snyder was the man who made immoral wishes come true. Marvin entered the warehouse through a skylight, moving with the silent precision that had kept him alive for 30 years. Snyder was alone in his office, reviewing files for upcoming contracts. 3 more assassination orders, 2 blackmail operations, and a witness who needed to disappear before testifying in federal court. Harold Snyder, Marvin said quietly from the office doorway. Snyder spun in his chair, reaching for a pistol in his desk drawer. Marvin's suppressed weapon was already aimed at his heart. Hand on the desk. Move slowly. Abbott, what the hell are you doing here? The Crowe contract has been permanently reassigned. We need to discuss your client list, your operational procedures, and what happens to your business moving forward. Snyder's eyes narrowed. You're working for him now? The target. I'm working for someone who appreciates professional excellence and pays accordingly. Victor Crowe offered me partnership, not just contract fees. He's turned you, convinced you to betray your own profession. Marvin smiled without warmth. Harold, I've spent 3 decades killing people for money. Victor Crowe spent 18 years killing people for his country, then transitioned to protecting others from money. Which of us is betraying professional standards? The philosophical question was rhetorical. Marvin had already decided Harold Snyder's fate. The private investigator represented a loose end that could expose both Victor's operation and Marvin's new partnership. More importantly, Snyder's files contained enough evidence to destroy dozens of powerful people, leverage that Victor could use in his war against the Petrov family. I have backups, Snyder said desperately. Kill me, and everything goes to the FBI. You have automated systems that release information if you fail to check in, Marvin agreed. Victor anticipated that. He's been monitoring your digital security for the past week. Every backup location, every dead man switch, every insurance policy you've established. Snyder's face went pale as he realized the implications. Victor Crowe hadn't just recruited Marvin Abbott. He'd been planning this operation since discovering Barbara's betrayal. What do you want? Your complete client files, all active contracts, and the contact information for everyone in your network. In exchange, you get to disappear instead of dying. And if I refuse? Marvin gestured towards Snyder's computer screen, which now displayed surveillance footage from inside the warehouse. Victor's been watching this place for a week. He knows about your weapons cache, your escape routes, even your offshore accounts. You can cooperate and live, or resist and become another casualty of war. Harold Snyder looked at the files spread across his desk. 3 decades of criminal enterprise about to be transferred to someone who would use them more effectively than he ever had. Victor Crowe was dismantling his organization while simultaneously absorbing its capabilities. The revolution in the criminal underworld was just beginning. Chapter 7, Night of Reckoning. The luxury yacht Barbara's dream bobbed gently in its slip at Riverside Marina. 32 feet of polished mahogany and chrome that had cost Dennis Buckley more than most people earned in 5 years. The name, a romantic gesture during happier times, now seemed like cruel irony as Dennis approached the vessel with a briefcase full of incriminating documents. Victor Crowe watched from the shadows of the harbor master's office, night vision goggles revealing Dennis's nervous movements. The developer kept checking his phone, looking for additional messages from Jorge Rivers. There would be none. Jorge was currently zip-tied in the safe house basement, contemplating how his comfortable life had dissolved into nightmare. Target approaching the yacht. Victor whispered into his radio headset. Copy. Marvin Abbott responded from his position on the adjacent pier. No additional security. He came alone as instructed. Dennis boarded the yacht and immediately headed for the main cabin, seeking the warmth and security of enclosed space. He brought a pistol, a chrome-plated .38 that he'd purchased for protection but never fired outside a gun range. The weight of it in his jacket pocket provided false comfort. Victor moved across the marina like a shadow, his footsteps silent on the wooden docks. 20 years of operational experience had taught him that the most dangerous moment in any mission was the initial contact. Once violence began, training and instinct took over. But the approach required perfect psychological precision. The yacht's cabin lights illuminated Dennis as he paced nervously, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He'd brought a bottle of expensive scotch, liquid courage for what he believed would be a desperate planning session with Jorge Rivers. Instead, he was about to face the man he'd tried to murder. Victor stepped aboard the yacht with casual confidence, his presence announced by the slight shift of the vessel in the water. Dennis turned toward the sound, expecting to see Jorge Rivers. Instead, he found himself staring into the cold gray eyes of Victor Crowe. "Hello, Dennis. Enjoying your yacht?" Dennis's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, but Victor's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't. Mr. Abbott had a rifle trained on you from the pier. Any aggressive movement, and your head disappears." "How did you? Where's Jorge?" "Jorge is having a conversation with some federal agents. Very productive discussion about money laundering operations and criminal conspiracy." Victor moved deeper into the cabin, forcing Dennis to back against the bar. He was surprisingly cooperative once he understood the alternatives. "You're bluffing. Jorge would never." Victor tossed Dennis's phone onto the cabin table. The screen displayed text messages between Dennis and Jorge, including tonight's meeting arrangement. But Dennis could see the timestamp discrepancies. Messages that had supposedly come from Jorge were sent after his last confirmed communication. "You've been texting with me for the past 2 hours," Victor explained conversationally. "Jorge's phone, his codes, his communication patterns. Surveillance makes impersonation remarkably easy." Dennis's legs gave out, depositing him heavily in a leather chair. "What do you want?" "Justice. You and my wife conspired to murder me. You involved my family in a criminal enterprise that put my daughter in danger. You betrayed my trust and violated my home." Victor's voice carried no emotion, but his words landed like physical blows. "Tonight, you're going to help me correct these problems. I can pay you. Whatever you want. Money, property, connections. I have resources." "You had resources." Past tense. Victor produced a tablet, displaying Dennis's bank accounts. Every balance showed 0. Funny thing about digital banking. Transfers can happen very quickly when you have the right access codes. Dennis stared at the screen in horror. $12 million gone. The accounts he'd built over 15 years of successful development work, wiped clean. Where did you send it? Various charitable organizations. Scholarships for underprivileged children, veteran support groups, women's shelters. Your money is now helping people instead of funding criminal enterprises. The cruelty of it was perfect. Dennis's wealth redistributed to causes he'd never supported. His life's work transformed into something that would have disgusted him. The FBI raids on Buckley properties began 3 hours ago, Victor continued. They found Jorge's financial records, the money laundering evidence, even surveillance footage of your meetings with Petrov Associates. You're officially a fugitive from federal justice. This is insane. You can't just destroy your life? Dennis, you hired an assassin to murder me. This is proportional response. Victor moved to the yacht's controls, starting the engines with practiced competence. Dennis realized with growing panic that they were leaving the marina. Where are we going? International waters, where certain conversations can take place without legal complications. The yacht moved smoothly through the harbor, navigation lights cutting through the darkness. Other vessels dotted the water. Weekend sailors, commercial fishing boats, Coast Guard patrols conducting routine security sweeps. None of them paid attention to another luxury yacht heading for open ocean. 20 miles from shore, Victor cut the engines and activated the yacht's anchor system. The silence was absolute except for water lapping against the hull and Dennis's labored breathing. "Now we discuss your relationship with the Petrov family," Victor said, producing a voice recorder. "Everything. Names, locations, operational procedures, financial arrangements. Complete cooperation earns you a quick death. Resistance earns you a very slow one." Dennis stared at the recorder, understanding that his life had narrowed to this moment. He could maintain his silence and die in agony, or provide information and die quickly. Either way, Victor Crowe intended to kill him. If I talk, what happens to Barbara? Barbara's fate depends on how useful your information proves to be. She's currently secured at a location where she's contemplating her choices. The lie was smooth and convincing. In reality, Barbara was at the safe house with Jorge Rivers, both of them providing detailed information about their respective roles in the conspiracy. But Dennis didn't need to know that his cooperation was redundant. The Petrovs will kill anyone who betrays them, Dennis said finally. The Petrovs are about to have much bigger problems than hunting down informants. Their organization is about to be systematically destroyed. Victor pressed record on the device. Begin with your first contact with Jorge Rivers. Everything. Details matter. As Dennis began talking, his voice breaking with despair, Victor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first phase of his revenge was complete. Dennis Buckley would never see another sunrise, but his information would ensure that everyone else who'd betrayed Victor Crowe would join him in death. The war against the Petrov family was about to begin in earnest. Chapter 8. The Empire Strikes Back. Victor Petrov stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, his frame still powerful despite 62 years of life that had included 2 wars, 3 assassination attempts, and countless business disputes settled with violence. His mountain compound reflected his personality, functional, intimidating, and completely secure. The call from his lieutenant, Reginald Gross, had shattered what should have been a quiet Thursday morning. "Boss, we got problems. Dennis Buckley's dead. FBI raided his properties. Jorge Rivers is missing, probably arrested. The whole money laundering operation is compromised." Victor processed this information while staring out at the snow-covered peaks surrounding his fortress. 20 years of careful construction, and now it was unraveling in a matter of hours. How did law enforcement get financial records? Unknown. Could be inside informant. Could be surveillance we didn't detect. But it gets worse. Explain. Dennis's yacht was found this morning. He'd been tortured before he died. Professional work. Someone wanted information before killing him. Victor's blood chilled. Torture meant someone was targeting his organization specifically, not just exploiting an opportunity. The timing suggested coordination between the FBI raids and Dennis's murder. Any surveillance footage from the marina? Cameras were disabled. But we found something else. Reginald's voice carried unusual tension. Dennis's phone had outgoing calls to an encrypted number. We traced it. And Victor Crowe, the husband of the woman Dennis was sleeping with. The name hit Victor like a physical blow. His intelligence network had flagged Victor Crowe months ago when Dennis first mentioned the affair. Former CIA operative, specialized in assassination and destabilization operations, officially retired but maintaining connections throughout the intelligence community. "You told me he was neutralized," Victor said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Barbara Crowe hired Marvin Abbott to kill him. The contract should have been completed 2 days ago. Should have been. But Dennis is dead and Victor Crowe is making encrypted phone calls. What does that suggest to you?" Reginald was silent, understanding the implications. Marvin Abbott was either dead or had switched sides. Either possibility meant Victor Petrov was now at war with someone who possessed the skills and resources to destroy his organization. "Recall all street operations immediately," Victor ordered. "Full defensive posture. No one moves alone. No meetings in public spaces. No communications except through encrypted channels." What about retaliation? First, we determine what we're facing. If Victor Crowe has turned Abbott, we're dealing with 2 professional killers working together. If he's working with federal agents, we're facing a coordinated law enforcement operation. Either way, we need intelligence before we act. What Victor didn't know was that Victor Crowe had been monitoring his communications for the past week. The compound's satellite uplink, encrypted though it was, had been compromised by technology that the CIA had developed but never publicly acknowledged. Every phone call, every radio transmission, every digital communication was being recorded and analyzed. Victor listened to Viktor Petrov's orders from his safe house command center, smiling with grim satisfaction. The crime boss was reacting exactly as predicted, pulling his organization into defensive positions that would make them easier to target individually. Phase 2 begins tonight, Victor announced to Marvin Abbott. Petrov's ordered a full pullback. That means his street operations are consolidated into 3 locations. Marvin studied the intelligence maps spread across their operations table. Viktor Petrov's empire was built on geographic distribution, drug corners, human trafficking routes, arms dealing networks scattered across the city to minimize law enforcement impact. But defensive consolidation would concentrate his forces into predictable patterns. 3 locations, Marvin observed. Warehouse in the industrial district, apartment complex on the south side, and the strip club downtown. Each one defended by 8 to 10 men. Professional security, but not military grade. Victor traced attack routes on the maps. We hit all 3 simultaneously, make it look like coordinated gang warfare. The plan was elegantly vicious. Each location would be attacked with different methodologies to suggest multiple enemy organizations. The warehouse would face explosive charges and rifle fire, the signature of rivals muscling in on territory. The apartment complex would experience precision sniper attacks, suggesting law enforcement or military involvement. The strip club would be hit with close-quarters combat that mimicked organized crime internal disputes. What about civilian casualties? Marvin asked. Minimized, but not eliminated. This is war, not surgery. Collateral damage adds authenticity to the gang warfare narrative. Victor's transformation was complete. The suburban family man who'd once coached Little League Baseball was gone, replaced by the cold-blooded operative who destabilized governments and eliminated America's enemies. Morality was a luxury he could no longer afford. At 11:47 p.m., 3 explosions rocked the city within 4 minutes of each other. The warehouse erupted in flames as military-grade charges destroyed Viktor Petrov's primary drug distribution center. Sniper fire from a neighboring rooftop eliminated 6 guards at the apartment complex before police could respond. The strip club's main floor became a war zone as masked attackers systematically executed everyone inside. By midnight, 37 members of the Petrov organization were dead, and their entire street-level operation had been eliminated. Emergency services responded to what appeared to be the opening salvo of a massive gang war. Viktor Petrov received the casualty reports in his secure communications bunker, his face betraying no emotion as he processed the scale of the disaster. 3 generations of careful organization building, destroyed in a single coordinated attack. Sir, Reginald Gross said quietly, we've lost 60% of our street operations. Revenue streams are completely disrupted. The men are requesting permission to retaliate. Against whom? We don't even know who attacked us. It has to be Victor Crow. The timing, the coordination. Prove it. Find me evidence, witnesses, surveillance footage. Something that justifies launching a war against a former CIA operative. Victor understood what his subordinates didn't. They were facing an enemy who possessed institutional knowledge of how to destroy organizations like theirs. Victor Crow wasn't just killing their people. He was systematically dismantling their infrastructure using techniques perfected by American intelligence agencies. The realization carried a terrifying implication. If Victor Crow could destroy their street operations in a single night, what else was he capable of? More importantly, how could they fight an enemy who anticipated their every move? Double the compound security, Victor ordered. No one enters or leaves without my direct authorization. And find me everything we have on Victor Crow's background, his contacts, his capabilities. I want to know what we're really fighting. As his organization pulled back into fortress mentality, Viktor Petrov didn't realize he was playing exactly the game Victor Crow wanted him to play. The more isolated the Petrov family became, the easier they would be to eliminate when the final phase began. The war was entering its most dangerous stage, and Victor Crow held every advantage. Chapter 9. Endgame. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago buzzed with unusual activity as FBI agent Earl Arias reviewed the evidence packages that had arrived throughout the week. Financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations, and detailed organizational charts of the Petrov crime family's operations. Enough evidence to justify the largest organized crime investigation in the city's history. What Agent Arias didn't know was that every piece of evidence had been curated and delivered by Victor Crowe, creating a paper trail that would legitimize everything that was about to happen. "Sir," Agent Patricia Patton said, entering Arias's office with another file folder. "We've got confirmation on the money laundering operation. Buckley Properties processed over $50 million in criminal proceeds through construction projects. And Dennis Buckley? Still missing. Coast Guard found his yacht abandoned 20 miles offshore, but no body yet." Arias nodded grimly. Dennis Buckley was almost certainly dead, but the investigation would continue without him. The evidence was overwhelming, enough to justify arrest warrants for Victor Petrov and 43 associates. "When do we move on the compound?" "Tomorrow morning. Federal marshals are coordinating with local SWAT teams for a simultaneous raid." What neither agent realized was that Victor Petrov already knew about the planned raid. Victor Crowe had ensured that information reached the crime boss through channels that would seem like routine intelligence leaks. The goal wasn't to help Petrov escape. It was to force him into making a fatal mistake. At the mountain compound, Victor Petrov studied satellite images of federal staging areas while his remaining lieutenants prepared for siege warfare. 47 men remained from an organization that had once numbered over 200. The attacks on their street operations had been devastating, but the compound itself remained impregnable. "They'll hit us at dawn," Victor announced to his war council. Standard federal procedure: overwhelming force, coordinated assault, minimize casualties by ending resistance quickly. "Can we hold them off?" asked Reginald Gross. "For a while. But this isn't about winning a firefight with federal agents. It's about surviving long enough to identify and eliminate the real threat." Victor had reached the correct conclusion, but too late to act on it effectively. Victor Crowe had spent weeks maneuvering the Petrov family into this exact position. Isolated, surrounded by enemies, with no escape routes. "Sir," one of his communications specialists announced, "we're getting interference on all encrypted channels. Someone's jamming our satellite uplink." Victor's blood went cold. Communication jamming during a federal raid could only mean one thing. Victor Crowe was nearby, preparing to exploit the chaos for his own purposes. "Shut down all electronic systems. Hardline communications only. And give me a visual sweep of the perimeter. If Crowe is out there, I want to know about it." What Victor's men found was disturbing. Evidence of recent surveillance positions on the ridgelines surrounding the compound. Professional hides, military-grade equipment, clear firing lanes down into the facility. Someone had been watching them for days, possibly weeks. The realization hit Victor like a physical blow. While he'd been focused on defending against federal assault, Victor Crowe had been preparing his own attack. The FBI raid wasn't the main threat. It was cover for something much worse. At 5:43 a.m., as federal agents began their approach to the compound, Victor Crowe and Marvin Abbott occupied sniper positions 800 meters up the mountainside. Their Barrett .50 caliber rifles commanded overlapping fields of fire that covered every exit from the facility. Federal vehicles approaching from the east, Marvin reported through his radio headset. "Estimate 20 minutes until they're in position." "Copy. Begin target acquisition. Primary targets are Victor Petrov and Reginald Gross. Everyone else is secondary." Victor studied the compound through his scope, identifying individual defenders by their movement patterns and equipment. 18 years of operational experience had taught him to read battlefield dynamics like a chess master analyzing positions. The Petrov organization was trapped between federal assault and his own ambush. The first explosion came from the compound's main gate as federal breaching charges eliminated the primary entrance. Automatic weapons fire erupted immediately as Petrov's men engaged the FBI assault teams. The battle would be intense but brief, federal agents had overwhelming numerical superiority and professional training. Through his scope, Victor saw Viktor Petrov emerge from the main building, directing his men's defensive positions. The crime boss moved with military precision, clearly experienced in combat operations. But experience wouldn't save him from a .50 caliber bullet fired by one of America's most skilled snipers. Target acquired, Victor whispered into his radio. Viktor Petrov, main courtyard, range 812 meters. I have Reginald Gross, Marvin confirmed. Communications building, second floor window. Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. Both rifles discharged simultaneously, their suppressed reports lost in the general chaos of the federal assault. Viktor Petrov's head disappeared in a pink mist as the .50 caliber bullet terminated his criminal empire permanently. Reginald Gross died instantly as Marvin's shot punched through the communications building wall and removed his torso. With their leadership eliminated, the Petrov organization collapsed within minutes. Federal agents swept through the compound, encountering sporadic resistance from demoralized defenders who no longer had coherent command structure. All primary targets eliminated, Victor reported. Beginning exfiltration. The two snipers moved down the mountainside with practiced stealth, leaving no trace of their presence. By the time federal agents had secured the compound, Victor and Marvin were 15 miles away, monitoring the aftermath through encrypted radio channels. FBI agent Earl Arias stood in the compound's main courtyard, surveying the damage. Viktor Petrov's body lay crumpled beside a fountain, victim of what appeared to be internal violence during the assault. The official report would conclude that the crime boss had been killed by his own men during the chaos of the federal raid. Sir, Agent Patricia Patton approached with an evidence bag. We found this in the main building. Arias examined the contents, detailed financial records, organizational charts, and communication logs that documented every aspect of the Petrov family's criminal operations. The evidence was too complete, too perfectly organized to be accidental. Someone wanted us to find this, Arias observed. Yes, sir. But whoever it was, they've done us a favor. This evidence will convict every surviving member of the organization. 3 days later, Victor Crowe sat in his safe house watching news coverage of the FBI's successful operation against organized crime. 73 arrests, the seizure of hundreds of millions in criminal assets, and the complete dismantling of one of the most dangerous crime families in the country. Barbara and Jorge Rivers have been released from federal custody after providing testimony that corroborated the evidence packages. Barbara's story, that she'd been coerced into cooperating with Dennis Buckley's criminal associates, had been accepted by prosecutors who needed her testimony to secure convictions. She would return to her empty house, her marriage destroyed and her lover dead, to face a lifetime of knowing that her betrayal had triggered a war that killed hundreds of people. The suburban life she'd tried to escape through adultery was gone forever, replaced by the knowledge that she'd married a man capable of orchestrating mass destruction. Marvin Abbott had disappeared with $15 million. His share of the assets Victor had seized from the Petrov organization's accounts before the FBI raids. The assassin would establish a new identity in a country without extradition treaties, finally able to retire from a profession that had consumed 30 years of his life. Victor Crowe no longer existed in any official capacity. His identification documents, financial accounts, and legal identity had been expertly erased. In his place stood a new man with a new name, backed by enough money to disappear permanently or establish any life he chose. The last item on his agenda was personal. Victor stood in his daughter Lindsay's bedroom, watching her sleep peacefully. At 16, she remained innocent of the violence that had consumed her family. The official story, that her father had died in an accident while her mother was being treated for a nervous breakdown, would protect her from the truth. Lindsay would wake tomorrow to find a trust fund that would pay for her education and provide financial security for life. A letter from her deceased father would explain that he'd loved her, but had been forced to disappear to protect her from dangerous people. She would never know that her father had orchestrated the deaths of nearly 200 people to avenge his betrayal. Victor kissed his daughter's forehead gently, memorizing her face for the last time. Then he walked away from the life he'd built, the family he'd loved, and the man he'd been. Behind him, Victor Crowe ceased to exist. Ahead lay a new identity, a new life, and the satisfaction of absolute justice perfectly executed. The war was over. The victor had claimed his prize. And somewhere in the darkness, a new legend was born. The ghost who destroyed an empire and vanished without a trace, leaving only bodies and legends in his wake. Barbara Morse would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, knowing that monsters walked among ordinary men, and that she'd been married to the most dangerous monster of all. Justice, Victor reflected as he disappeared into the night, was a dish best served with absolute precision and no possibility of survival for those who'd earned it. The game was over. He'd won completely.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.